Hi, I'm Michelle Begue with a look at what's happening in Latin America now. But first, our news trivia. Which is the most expensive country in Latin America? We'll have the answer later. Now let's go to my colleague Al Baverstock in Mexico, who has a special report.
President Andrés Manuel López Obrador delivered his 6th and final State of the Union address in Mexico City on Sunday. In a speech lasting more than 2 hours, AMLO outlined the achievements of his administration, which he describes as the 4th transformation of Mexico. He said the country's economy had grown from the world's 15th to 12th largest, has implemented major infrastructure, and pulled 10 million people out of poverty. However, he still has plans for his last month in office, a constitutional reform that calls for the election by popular vote of more than 7,000 judges, including the Supreme Court. The reform has generated concern among investors who worry that it would weaken the checks and balances of the executive branch and damage the business climate. In response, the president asked for a show of hands of those in favour. As Mexico's president finished his last official speech, his legacy may now be defined by his final month in office.
Ecuador has experienced its largest wildfires in memory in recent years. The region most affected is Quilanga in the southern province of Loja, bordering with Peru. Over 10 days, 4,000 hectares were burned. The fire was finally controlled, thanks in part to the help of Peru and Colombia. Both countries sent Air Force helicopters and planes, releasing thousands of gallons of water over the affected areas. After 6 days of international help, the wildfire was finally put out. Now let's go to my colleague Joel Richards in Argentina, who has a special report.
Javier Milei has issued his first veto as president of Argentina. The libertarian overruled a pension increase that the Senate had voted for. That increase was designed to protect the elderly from seeing their income fall behind inflation. Viewers will no doubt recall that Argentina has the world's highest inflation rate, still running at over 260% annually, even if the monthly inflation rate is falling. Milei's #1 priority is eradicating the country's fiscal deficit, and his government defended the veto, saying the fiscal impact of the pension hike has not been considered. Milei is the outsider who continues to rally against the political class, and there is ongoing tension with Congress. Congress could yet overturn this presidential veto, and this tension with lawmakers raises the question of whether Javier Milei will be able to implement his political and economic project.
Chaos in Colombia as truckers in major cities blocked highways to protest a recent increase in the price of diesel fuel. Unions have said the plans by the government to eliminate diesel fuel subsidies would push their businesses to the brink of bankruptcy. The government of President Gustavo Petro argues it must phase out subsidies to cut growing budget deficits and direct funds to education and health. Roadblocks and strikes have intensified in major cities like Bogotá, Medellín, and Cali. Now let's check out what stories we're following for next week. We're following Brazil's battle with Elon Musk's business empire. First, Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva backed a top court's decision to suspend the social network X from the country. The reason? A judge found that X allowed postings of hate messages and falsehoods about the country's electronic voting system. Now tension is building over Musk's satellite broadband company, Starlink. The country's telecom regulator is threatening sanctions against Starlink for possibly refusing to obey the order for all internet providers to block domestic access to X. And now the answer to our news trivia. The answer is A. According to the World Bank, Uruguay is the most expensive country in Latin America and the 10th most expensive in the world. The World Bank compared a list of 600 products, like toothpaste or ketchup, in 44 countries and realized that Uruguay was at least 20% more expensive than its neighbors Argentina and Brazil, and way more expensive than countries like Mexico and Bolivia. One of the reasons is that Uruguay imports a lot of goods, and the supply chain plus the high taxes make them much more expensive. sometimes twice more expensive, which is what happens to the price of gas. On the good side, the World Bank also said that Uruguay has one of the highest minimum wages in the region and a robust and large middle class. And that's it for this week. We'll see you again soon on Latin America Now.